Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. Today I'm joined by Twan and Issam to talk about the second day of racing at the World Championships in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Twan and Issam, thank you for joining me once again at late night to talk about cyclocross.
Hello.
Hey everybody.
As said, today was the second day of racing at the Cyclocross World Championships. First off, we will start by talking about the men's elite race, and Issam will tell us what happened there.
Yeah, well, we knew that this was going to be a fast race, and what we kind of saw in the beginning of the race was a very big group. And in the beginning, it was Lars van der Haar that was very strong in the first lap, being at the front. Later on, we had some attacks from Toon van der Bos, Zweek, Van Toerenhout. They were all there on the front, showing themselves. Also Joshua Dubois. But the favorites, Pidcock and Iserbyt, Aerts, they were all alert. They were all good at the front. At a certain point, Pidcock was maybe a little bit agitated by the Belgians halfway through the race, a little bit before that, and then saw the danger maybe that the Belgians will play a little bit of games, made his move, put the guys under pressure, and the man of Leeds was just simply the best, was gone. Behind him, Iserbyt reckons the danger, tries to close that gap, but the gap was already going into the direction of 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and at a certain point it just cracked. Iserbyt was not able to follow. Then he has to look behind him, and then the battle for second place is actually going to start, because they will not see Pidcock back at that time, and also at the finish he will be able to win the World Championships. Behind him, a group with Van Toerenhout, Iserbyt, Van der Haar and Venturini. Zweek was there as well, but will eventually be dropped. Van Toerenhout and Venturini were riding a quite strong race, especially Venturini, unexpected, maybe. Were able to follow, but at the end they were just not strong enough to fight for that podium. And then we had Van der Haar and Iserbyt. Van der Haar was pulling most of the end of the race. Iserbyt was sitting right in the wheel, tries to get rid of him before the sprint, but doesn't succeed in that, and then they will battle it out on the start-finish. A sprint between Van der Haar and Iserbyt, and in the end, Van der Haar was just that little bit stronger than Iserbyt, getting his second place, and Iserbyt rounds off the top three on the podium at the World Championships in Fayetteville.
Very strong ride by Tom Pidcock today. I think that what we need to discuss first is the comment of Michael Van Toerenhout after the race, because that has implications on the ride of Pidcock and what we think about it. Michael Van Toerenhout after the race said that he thinks that the Belgians could have done more and normally would never have been dropped from the wheel by Van Toerenhout. How do you guys think about that? Did the Belgians choke this race and bottle it, or was Pidcock simply just too strong?
I think he was simply the best. I mean, he was stronger than the rest. There was definitely a gap there, but I can see where Van Toerenhout comes from if we talk specifically about the moment Pidcock went away, because it was on that uphill, downhill kind of thing where they have a U-turn where they have to make it, and they go uphill, do the turn, and then go downhill again. We had seen Bastans having difficulties in the first lap, crashing out, and ruining his chances for a top 10. To be honest, if I look now at the picture, I saw that Van Toerenhout was the one actually that made the mistake. He was accusing Pidcock of doing that, but I guess he did it himself. But I think it was just a matter of time for Pidcock to get away from the rest. He was the stronger guy. A rider after a race is probably not the best time to ask him a question, because they are disappointed and trying to seek for excuses and stuff. But I think that after the race, ask him this question 2, 3, 4 days later, and he's going to say something different. I'm pretty sure about that.
I think so as well. I think it's always important to say that when you are racing yourself, you can see it differently. Maybe Van Toerenhout remembers it differently. From my experience as racing, I also know that sometimes I think after the race, oh well, this guy, he let the gap fall, and when I rewatch it, I can see that I just remembered it incorrectly. It's of course possible, but I personally think that Pidcock was just the strongest today. He peaked towards this for his entire cross season. What do you think, Twan? Very deserved victory, of course, by Pidcock, but what were your thoughts on his race today?
I think he was very good, and the best rider won today. Just in general, a very good performance. I think he can be very happy with his riding. Very tactically aware as well, just making sure that he was always only behind one Belgian, just moving with it very well until he attacked and left them in the dust.
And I think that Pidcock here found a course that did suit him. I think that if it would have been muddy, he would of course have had a very different race. You can't control the weather here, so I think that the critique on the course is in some way justified because it is a very atypical course. It's not really conditions you associate with cyclocross. You always see mud. But if you would have had rain, then we would have had conditions similar to the World Cup here, and the talk would have been completely different. Then we might have had a similar scenario as in Valkenburg, where people would say the course is too difficult. I think that for Pidcock here, the dry conditions were, I think they were good for him. He was able to use his power, his road experience, and that came to play here. And of course, there's no point in speculating what if it was muddy. Pidcock could well have won then as well, but I think it was just a deserved title by Pidcock, peaked his season towards this, and it confirms what we thought last week, that he was really busy with this, and that was his last preparation. 30 seconds in the end over Lars van der Haar, and I think that Van der Haar was one of the first riders to actually know, okay, today is going to be for second place, Pidcock is too strong, I'm not good enough.
Yeah, and that, he gambled pretty early on that second place, saw probably that Pidcock was just a little bit stronger, and that was just very smart from him, because I think in the end that energy saving made it for him a little bit easier to win in the end in the sprint, because he had just enough energy to beat Iserbyt in the sprint. To be honest, the last 2 laps he didn't ask a single moment to Iserbyt to take a turn. I think even 3 laps, it was quite an impressive achievement just a performance in general from Van der Haar, what he was doing there, pulling, even closing the gap a little bit on Pidcock. Obviously Pidcock was not pushing anymore, but still I think that pace in the last couple of laps was pretty good from Van der Haar, and to then eventually also win in the sprint, counter an attack from Iserbyt. I think we knew that he was going to be a favorite for the podium. I personally didn't expect Pidcock to be this good. It is expected that he can do something like this. We know he's a great guy, great rider in general. But then again, his results were a bit iffy, so you don't really know if it's going to happen or not. Eventually made it happen, which makes him a great rider. And I think that Van der Haar did a very good job in beating Iserbyt.
Yeah, I think that overall the 3 riders we see at the front, together with Wout van Aert, are the riders of the season. Iserbyt, the rider with the most wins, winner of the World Cup, most likely going to win the Super Prestige. Van der Haar, winner of the European Championships, done very consistent throughout the season, second at the Worlds. Pidcock being the best rider behind Van Aert throughout most of his cyclocross season, and eventually winning the world title, which immediately puts you up there. So I think that overall, I think the top 3 can be happy with their results. I think they all were happy with their results as well in the end. What did you think about the battle for second place, Ton?
Van der Haar is just very strong, targeting the championships this season, and can be very happy with what he was able to put on the show for. I didn't really understand why he was trying to attack Iserbyt, trying to drop him. I guess it's always more fun to come in solo, but I think he always has him in a sprint. So yeah, that was a bit weird to me, but all is well that ends well.
I think it was more a matter of that Van der Haar couldn't drop Iserbyt here. Iserbyt was strong today, not strong enough to follow Pidcock. He was happy with his 3rd place, but I think that, yes, okay, Iserbyt came for the world title, he didn't win. Yes, he sacrificed a couple of races, including the Belgian Championships, for the world title, which he didn't get. I don't know if a 3rd place justifies the sacrifices he made earlier in terms of sponsor, prestige, and also exposure. But I think if we compare it with the earlier standard Iserbyt set, that the 3rd place is definitely an improvement, and we do still have to conclude that Iserbyt is setting steps every year to becoming a more mature rider, also in terms of his answers after the race, because he didn't blame anyone, he was really honest, he wasn't upset, he wasn't whining. He just came with a straight-up conclusion, and that's things that we have seen different from Iserbyt, but also from other riders.
Yeah, I think this season he made a big step in a couple of areas. I mean, there were things that he wasn't really able to do, and this season he was improved overall quite well, and there is not really a parcours that doesn't really suit him at this point. He's doing it quite well overall, performing at every race, trying at least. I didn't really like the way he was going towards the Worlds. That was not really the greatest way of doing it, I think, with trying, giving up so early and stuff in some of the races. But in the end, I think that it's just what he had done in the season is a bit of a, I would say, the conclusion in the end is that, that third place is really deserved, because I think in this season he was the best in terms of results. Overall, I think we have to count off Wout van Aert at this point, because he was just above the rest overall. But I think if you look at the performances, the classifications, the most consistent overall, started the season early and was able to not have that drop that he normally has. So I think, someone that is only 24 years old, he's still young, still has some years left in him, and I think there will be many more years for him that he can battle for a championship for sure.
I mean, he's 22 now. This is his first year that he is actually forced to ride with the elites. So what is that? That makes 10, 15 more years of Pidcock. He's going to be racing road and mountain bike, aiming for the Triple Crown this season. And was it me, or did this race kind of give me some Strade Bianche vibes, also with that very steep climb? I think that, of course, it's still far away and no need to preview Strade Bianche, but I'm very excited to see what Pidcock can do there, because, as I said, it gave me kind of Strade Bianche vibes.
That kind of effort, that kind of technique that you have to put on display there, it certainly is something that should suit Pidcock, and it will be very interesting to see what he can do over the wide roads.
Let's look at our entire top 10 then. Tom Pidcock becoming the first ever champion of the world from the UK in the elite categories, ending ahead of Lars van der Haar and Elie Iserbyt. Just off the podium we find Michael van Toerenhout ahead of Clément Venturini. Then 6th place went to Toon Aerts ahead of Jens Adams and Zweek. 9th place went to Kevin Kuhn, and in the end a big fight for 10th, but that went to Daan Soete. Another fact about Tom Pidcock's World Championship win: he is the first non-Dutch, Belgian or Czech champion since Pontoni in 1997, so that's been quite a while. But let's focus on some riders in the top 10. We already discussed the comment about Van Toerenhout. Van Toerenhout in 4th, he is not happy with that result. I think Van Toerenhout was in good form today, but I do at the end of the day also think that 4th was the maximum achievable, and that he is at the end even still lucky to end ahead of Venturini, who had a very strong showing here.
I don't really see where he could have done something maybe a little bit different. Maybe at the start be more conservative with his energy, but that was probably the plan of the Belgium, to try and attack a little bit and see if that guerrilla attack is going to do something against Tom Pidcock. But anything else, I don't really know. He came right down to his place. I think 4th is, maximum that he could have done. I think he should have been disappointed if Venturini was ahead of him, but other than that, I think, I wouldn't be disappointed. I think maybe he expected the podium. That might be where the disappointment comes from, but in the end, I think that he did a very solid race, good race. Was there for Iserbyt in the beginning of the race, helped him out. Made sure also there when they were in the group with Van der Haar as well that group was going. So I think overall he can just be satisfied with that result, and I think that the disappointment will go when they go on the plane back to Belgium.
Yeah, I think in the end he ends just ahead of Venturini. Twan, what did you think about Venturini today?
I was quite excited to see what Venturini was able to do. Of course, an okay road rider, and with how this parcours was and its current condition, I thought maybe if he was on a good day, he could do very interesting things, and he really was able to do very interesting things, staying in there for a really long time, and even pushing Michael van Toerenhout for that 4th place in the end. A great achievement by the Frenchman, and this really is his kind of parkour, and I would love to see him, for example, next year in Hoogheide, if we see somewhat similar conditions, do a little bit more cyclocross to prepare for it.
I mean, it doesn't even necessarily need to be similar conditions, because Venturini has done a very, 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 very limited cyclocross campaign this season. He started in Hulst, that's in January. We were already saying, Van Aert and Pidcock, they start so late. They did a month more of racing than Venturini. I'm not going to say Venturini could have become world champion here, but for sure Venturini was also stitched at the airport before coming here after his crash in Hogerheide. But I think yes, the course suits him, but overall, Vanterini is a very capable cyclocross rider. I've said it when he was starting his career, or his season, I mean, that I think that if he goes to the World Championships, he can top 10. I've been saying this also last year a couple of times, that it's a shame that he doesn't do more cyclocross racing. So here is my prayer to Clément Vanterini. As Ton said, please go to Hoogheide next year, and even if the conditions aren't similar, I think he can get another top 10 because he is a very talented cyclocross rider at the end of the day. I mean, with such a limited campaign, of course, the course suited him as said, but he still beat riders like Jens Adams, Laurens Sweeck, Toon Aerts, riders that have done an entire season, who are also seen as high-level cyclocross riders. About these 3 Belgians that we just named, I mean, can we conclude that all of these riders exploded in trying to play the Belgian team tactic games at the front for as long as possible?
Yeah, I mean, for Sweeck, yes, but I mean, for Toon Aerts, it is not really the race that I expected from him. I saw a role, maybe that in the first lap he tried to, that attack, that it cost him too much energy, but I didn't really see that costed him a lot of energy, or at least I didn't see that energy going out there. So, yeah, I think that he just didn't really perform like I expected him to do, and I think that also you can expect from him. But yeah, in the end, I think that he realized that it was not going to be for a podium, and then obviously it's going to be, the mental part is going to play in, I think, and then you're not going to give it your all like you do when you are fighting for a podium. So then, slowly but surely, you're just not really getting in the rhythm. And this is a parkour where if you get out of rhythm, it's done. You're not going to get back. You're not going to be able to fight back. So I think that was the case. I think I was quite, I wouldn't say hyped with the performance of Jens Adams. Very happy for him. One of the guys that is a solo sponsor, doing everything on his own with the support of those guys from that ferry. But that is, I think for him that was quite a good achievement, and was very nice to see him there in 7th.
Definitely agree on that. Also nice to see Kevin Kuhn in the top 10, the Swiss rider who took a tumble in the beginning of the race. Recovered strong from that. Without that crash, could have been close to a top 5. Definitely strong showing by the Swiss rider who struggled a bit in the beginning of the season. I would also briefly like to mention a couple of riders just outside of the top 10. Turner had an issue at the start, almost top 10 without actually being on a course that suits him. Dubois also took a tumble, missed out on the top 10 because of that. Also strong race by him. But then the rider I really would like to mention, Curtis White, riding for the Cannondale CX World, ending 12th here, just outside of the top 10. Quite a surprise in my opinion, because 12th is by far his best result of the season in terms of high-profile racing.
When I was watching the US cyclocross scene, I wasn't really under the impression that Curtis White was really the best during the season. Some of the other guys maybe outperforming him a little bit, but I mean, the day that it mattered most, he was there, and he got a nice result, beating all his fellow countrymen, and a very decent 12th position in the end.
It was definitely good to see some other flags just outside of the top 10, and of course Vanterini in the top 10. I do, however, want to talk briefly about the British, because now they have Pidcock. We'll come to the youth categories a bit later, but with Cameron Mason, they have another talent coming through who got a top 10 in the World Cup. Turner, just outside of the top 10 on a course that doesn't suit him. In the juniors category, they had a rider on the podium. It's been something that's been coming ever since the World Championships in BLS, where they looked out the podium on the men's junior race. Of course, I haven't even mentioned the women's side, where they have Zoe Buxted and Ella McLean-Howell coming through. Also, Millie Cousins in the under-23 women's category is pretty talented. Do we know where all this British talent is coming from?
I think we have seen some talent from British cycling for a while now, and it's just coming up. I mean, they probably, they have a very good circuit in Britain themselves. They're working on it to make it even bigger than it already is. I think that is a very good part, and they are investing also a lot. There are some smaller teams that really put some effort in to make sure that those talents are getting the good treatment, and also are able to race in Belgium once in a while. And I think that with the support of some road teams, that helps. And yeah, it's just, they put effort in, and when you put effort in something, it takes some time, but then you get some talent out of it. And I think that they can look back at a successful championship. I think we have seen, despite the fact that they didn't had a lot of favorites, Backstedt obviously and Pidcock, we have seen, some great racing from all the Brits. So I think that overall they can be very satisfied with the championship that they have delivered.
Yeah, it's a lot of local clubs, and cycling in general, at least from what I've understand from Tom, is that it's growing in terms of popularity for the last couple of years, basically since Froome and Thomas on the road, and it also shows in cyclocross. Earlier this year we spoke with Simon Patterson about it, about how talent is developed in the UK and his own race, the Clanfield CX. That definitely shows us a bit more about how these Brits develop talent, but it was certainly good to see, and I think that overall they can conclude that it's been a pretty successful championship for them. Let's talk about the women's under-23 race then. Tuan will briefly tell us what went down there.
It was a very quick start by Amandine Fouquenet, who would quickly wind down the field to a group of 6 riders with the main 3 Dutch women in it after the first lap. And in that second lap, we would see an attack where Fem van Empel would really struggle to follow, and Pietersen and Van Anrooy would put on a pace, really trying to drop her, and this would go for about 2 laps, but Fem van Empel really able to keep the gap quite stable and eventually closing it as well. And then we slowly went toward the final lap as they couldn't get rid of each other, and Puk Pietersen was leading over the climb, attacking, trying to drop them, trying to lead into the tricky technical banked section, and she managed to do so, had to put a foot down because she messed it up slightly, which completely messed up Fem van Empel, who would end up having a mechanical there as well and put her completely out of the race. And Puk Pietersen and Van Anrooy would head to the finish line as, we would see a sprint between the two. Puk Pietersen won the world title ahead of Shirin Van Anrooy. Fem van Empel was still able to save a 3rd place.
What a cracker of a race. It had some weird dynamics in it. It went back and forth, and Van Empel was in and out, and then she was favored. But let's focus on that decisive moment in the last lap. The banked off camber where Pidcock also opened his gap, and we've talked about it yesterday as well. Puk Pietersen, what happened there? Was it on purpose? Did she try and block Van Anrooy and Van Empel? Or was it just a coincidence that she hit the top of the bank with her pedal?
I don't think it was intentional, but it was definitely a smart move if it was intentional. It's very hard to say, because maybe you have in your back of your head that you're going to be like, well, I want to be here ahead, and I'm going to make it as difficult as possible. You will never know in the end unless she says it herself, and I don't think she will. She wants to keep the relationship between the Dutch good, so I don't think she will say that. But yeah, it's very hard to say. From what it looked when I saw it live, I was quite sure that it was intentional. Afterwards, I've watched some replays. It's hard to say. It's very hard, and but in the end, that move was very crucial, and we have seen in several categories that part was actually quite crucial in the race. I mean, the climb was, but that part was quite a nasty one. And after that, it's very hard to stay in the wheel because of the corners that are coming up. It's coming so much after each other that it's very hard to sit in a wheel because the gap is just there, and then you have to try and close it.
I personally think that it wasn't intentional. When I watched the replays, I could see that the way she pedaled was really just her pedaling and then hitting the top, which eventually caused the rest to get into trouble. But I think that there is things to say for both, but I don't think you will pedal at the top if your tactic is to barely make it over. Then I think that for Pietersen it was just a coincidence, and the coincidence that was much needed because she barely beat Van Anrooy in a sprint, but Van Anrooy, in my opinion, waited too long with launching the sprint. What did you think, Tuan? Was it intentional by Pietersen, and did Van Anrooy wait too long?
Yeah, I think for Van Anrooy it was the best to make a longer sprint out of it and to use the slight downhill that came off the grass to her advantage with the speed. I think Pietersen would probably still have won regardless, but indeed she did leave it very late.
And do you think that Van Anrooy, besides the sprint, could have done anything differently to avoid the situation?
No, I think Van Anrooy rode a pretty decent tactical race, but she didn't have the legs to put in that one attack to draw Pieterse and Van Empel.
I agree with what you said. For Van Anrooy, it would have been difficult seeing the card she had to play. But I also think that launching a bit earlier, as you said, could have helped, seeing that she came over it just after the finish. But nevertheless, a solid result by her. And I think this is probably the last time we're going to see these three riders in the under 23 category, as their level was very high. Rider who we haven't mentioned was Van Empel. Van Empel struggling the entire race. It was a weird race for Van Empel. What are your conclusions on that, guys?
I don't know what quite to make of the race of Van Empel. I think she was okay today, not the greatest, but I don't know why she... I don't know, it seemed a bit like she played games with Pieterse and Van Anrooy, like in the way that she left that gap for 2 laps, but then still was able to close it pretty steadily. It just felt very weird. She was very strong, but maybe should have just done a little bit more, like go into that key section first. But
Van Empel for me looked to be on the back foot the entire race. I don't think she was playing games when she was caught behind. I think it was a mental thing at first, but it was, first of all, she had that bike change because her Di2 went into crash mode, meaning she couldn't shift gears anymore. She looked a bit upset about that, and then I think she made a misjudgment on the climb, because I could see she was sitting in the saddle when Pieterse accelerated there and Van Anrooy followed, and she was sitting in her saddle and thinking, oh, okay, this is just going to be a test. But once she saw it was serious, she got out of the saddle and accelerated. Before that, she was kind of looking like Froome, sitting in the saddle, spinning a very small gear. And then after that, she transformed into a smaller version of Tom Pidcock, shifting up gears and accelerating out of the saddle. So I think that for Van Empel, that was a misjudgment, and that cost her quite some energy to come back. But then again, in the last lap, yes, she should have tried to be in front of Pieterse, but when she wasn't, I mean, still, without that mechanical, she could have still become world champion in a sprint, right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, if it was going to be a sprint, we shouldn't be even debating who was going to win that sprint. I mean, that was clear. But, it didn't go to a sprint, and it's tough to see that happen, because obviously when you're in that moment, you think like, okay, now it is going towards a sprint, and I think that it's, for a rider, it's, the shittiest thing that can happen if your chain drops off and you were focusing everything on that sprint. But in the end, that is cyclocross as well, and you're not always going to have good luck, and sometimes bad luck is something that intervenes in a race. And now it's a bit bad because it is probably the most important race of the season, but that is how life goes, and that's cyclocross in the end.
I mean, Van Empel looked to be very upset with her result, and I mean, it makes sense. She was the defending champion. As I said, I think she made some mistakes earlier on in the race. I find it because of that hard to judge how strong she actually was today, because I think it was a misjudgment, but it could also be not having the legs to react. But we will never know. At the end, Pieterse is the world champion, and I think based on the season that Pieterse is a deserved world champion, because she has been the most consistent rider throughout the season in terms of under 23 riders.
I mean, looking at the season, definitely deserved title for Pieterse. I had her as the favorite in a way. I thought that race in Hogerheide was, in my opinion, that line that you need in terms of peak form to be, just in the best possible shape for probably the most important race for these women. And I think that sprint was phenomenal to watch. That it was so close in the end, but the strongest had won. I think that Pieterse was taking a lot of initiative. Van Anrooy was as well, but you could just see in the attacks that Pieterse was just able to do just that little bit more damage to Van Anrooy than Van Anrooy was on Pieterse. So definitely the deserved champion, and I think everybody can live with such a champion. I mean, the way she goes through the corners, very talented, technical also, super strong. So I think that everybody can live with her as a champion.
Let's look at our entire top 10 then. Full Dutch podium, Pieters ahead of Van Anrooy and Van Empel. Fourth place and fifth went to French riders Burquier and Foucounet. Then Marie Schreiber ended sixth ahead of Christina Zemanova. Then two Americans, Madigan Monroe ahead of Katie Klaus, and then 10th place went to Harriet Harnden. We can talk long or short about these riders, but seeing the gaps were very, very big, they weren't really on the broadcast. I'm going to say a statement about all of these riders, and you'll both say true or false, and if we don't disagree on that, we continue. First of all, Lynn Burquier, fourth, maximize the result on a course that doesn't suit her at all.
True.
True.
Amandie Foucounet, good rider, still lacks technical abilities, and seen her result on a course here, she's more a rider for the road.
True.
100% true.
Marie Schreiber, one of the most overlooked talents, ending sixth as a first year under 23 is very impressive.
True.
I wouldn't say overlooked, but yeah, I will have to agree on that. True.
But her race overall was still good today, right? I mean, she was up there at the beginning, but just couldn't stick. And as a first year under 23 who's been struggling a bit, still good to bounce off with a strong result at the Worlds.
100%. I think that there was definitely a strong result. I would have loved to see her a little bit, holding a little bit longer to the French, but in the end, sixth place was the maximum, and I think that that category for her is probably going to be very good in the next couple of years, and we will see her probably on that podium in coming the next couple of years, because the Dutch that are there right now, they probably will be there maybe for another year, but then that will disappear as well, and then there will be some room on the podium for her, I think.
I expect them to be gone by next year already. I mean, Van Empel won World Cups, Petersen being on the podium of them, Van Anrooy being on the podium of other races. I expect them to be in the elite categories next year, and it wouldn't surprise me if one of them stands on the podium immediately. We continue our list. Christina Zemanova in seventh, a very technical rider who did decent but could have aimed for higher today.
True.
Madigan Monroe, decent showing by another first year, also a name to look out for in the future.
False. Second year.
Alright, second year under 23. You are right there. Still overall, I think a decent race by Madigan Monroe, but again, for Monroe the same goes as for the riders we'll come to later. The course didn't suit her, and that would also be my statements for Klaus and Harnden. Can we conclude that for these three riders, if the course had been muddy, we could have seen them closer or in the top 5, because fast courses really don't suit them?
I think indeed that is going to be the case. I mean, in the end, if you look to the parkour, we can go up and go down, but this can happen to any course in the end. I mean, there are a lot of courses that if it doesn't rain, if it is not tough, it was going to be a fast race. I mean, Hogerheide, where we're going next year, that can be a fast race, so it can be a tough one. There are a lot of things that can be implemented in it to make it less, like we have seen today in the beginning, especially with the big groups, but it's still going to be a fast race. So I think that is not bad that we have one fast world championship in many very hard ones that we already had in the last couple of years.
Let's talk about the men's junior race then. A brief summary. Into the race, it was the fastest start for Nathan Smith, and it was actually David Haverdings who was the top favorite here, and he was looking to be relaxed in the beginning of the race. He was sitting in, I think, third place for most of the while, having everything in control, but then in the second lap he made a mistake. He crashed, lost more than half a minute, had to change his bike, and was 35 seconds down after that. It was game over for Haverdings, as at the front Aaron Dox waited not for a single second and accelerated. We eventually went to a situation with three leaders, Aaron Dox, Nathan Smith and Jan Christen, surprising name from Switzerland. We were having a very tense race, and we probably even more, as Nathan Smith was riding for our own cyclocross team, and he was looking to be very good. Aaron Dox was attacking from here and there, Christen was attacking a bit, but they couldn't get rid of each other. In the final lap, it was a major attack launch by Aaron Dox up the climb, but he couldn't drop anyone. It came down to a sprint eventually, and that was easily won by Jan Christen, the Swiss rider from the Poggi team, taking the victory ahead of Aaron Dox and Nathan Smith. I mean, what a thriller this was. Christen, we didn't mention him in our preview. Only one rider mentioned him for the podium in terms of our predictions on Instagram. It was Ava Holmgren who thought that this course could suit him, and well, it did. I mean, we didn't put him in our prediction, didn't mention him in our preview podcast. Were you guys also very surprised by him being up front today?
Yeah, and I think as the race went on, I think I understood it more and more. The guy has a pretty big engine in there, and whilst you could clearly see that if Aaron Dox put on the pressure in the descent, a few meters would open up. He would make up for it very quickly once we hit like the falls flat at the bottom of the hill. So yeah, a very good rider, and it's just really a course where he could shine.
I mean, I guess this is one of the few courses where he can excel. I do know that he put everything on the World Championships. In my longer list of outsiders, he was there. I still did not expect this at all from him. His best result before this was a couple of wins in smaller races, and I think 9th place in the World Cup, 10th at the Europeans, and maybe a handful of top 10s elsewhere. But, I mean, there were about 6 corners on this course, and he lost 2 or 3 seconds in every one of them, even still in the final lap. But seeing how fast this course was, he was definitely on the mission and had this in control. He signed a pre-contract with the UAE already as a first-year junior. Ridiculous in my opinion how early they get signed, but that's something new. I'll probably need to get used to that. And his talent today was shown once again. Fast course, he does it in a sprint, and I mean, about that sprint, did Dox go too early?
I think Dox just in general started that sprint in a very weird way when they were coming around the turns as well. I felt from when I was watching that Nathan Smith was pretty desperate to get to the front, but he didn't let him, whereas it's really beneficial in this type of sprint to be in second or in third place, and you would want to be behind Jan Christen because he looked to be the man with the second best or maybe the best sprint, in the end the best sprint. Just very poor sprint preparation by Aaron Dox, and from there on out he didn't really stand a chance.
Yeah, I think Dox went too early. Would it have mattered in the end? Probably not, seeing the sprint speed Christen had. I still find it a bit weird to deal with that Christen wins. I also don't know what to expect from him. As said, he signed a pre-contract with UAE. I have never seen a UAE rider be allowed to do a lot of cyclocross, so I don't know if this means that next year when he becomes an under 23, UAE will pull him away from the cross and put him on the track, because he also does that. It's hard to judge. I do know for sure that this isn't the most talented guy technically, or at least for now. We already said it, lost a lot of time on the technical sections. Would this World Championships have been somewhere else, then I don't think that he would have been that competitive as we saw throughout the entire season. But at the end of the day, it's a deserved victory. And Dox, I mean, Twan gave his thought on it. Isan, what did you think about Christen and Dox at the front of the race?
Yeah, I mean, Christen, I had him in the back of my head for like a top 5, but what he did today was above, I think, everybody's expectations. And I think also, I think that Dox wasn't really prepared for this. I think that Smith was someone he knew that he was probably able to beat in a sprint. In his interview afterwards, he was saying, I went on purpose too early to maybe surprise them, or I don't know what the plan was behind that, going so early in a sprint, but he said afterwards that wasn't enough. I don't know. He was feeling that he was the stronger guy. Maybe he was the stronger guy. I don't really know. But in the end, if you look at the sprint of Christen, that was something else. And Dox really didn't have an answer to that. And in the end, I think that the parkour played a very big role. Because if we were going on a parkour that was maybe a little bit slower, some mud, some sand, some more technical sections than already were with the high-low speed kind of descent that we had, I think then it would have been a different story for Kristen, but it's a very talented guy. On the road, has already done some incredible achievements. I think with the juniors already in the top 10 of the World Championship time trial. So, UAE knows what they have in hand, and let's hope that he tries to keep it on the cross and not only going to the road and focus on that and the track, like you said. But I think it's also very good that we have another nationality winning a championship than the Dutch and the Belgians.
I certainly think so as well. I think he's the first Swiss world champion in the juniors category since 1990 something, 1992 or something. We were in the times of Friesknecht. So it's certainly been quite a while. I do think that it's important to say that there were riders who didn't really live up to their full potential today. I would like to say that Nathan Smith, for instance, he rides for our team, and of course he did a very good job today, and in third he can be happy with that. But we have to conclude on the technical sections, Smith wasn't good enough, and as he rides for our own team, I have some explanation on that. I could see he wasn't comfortable on his bike, and that's for a reason. He was not riding his own bike. He rides on Ribble bikes normally, but his bike was not approved by the UCI. They forgot to UCI check their bike, so it was not an UCI approved bike. Got notified on Friday that he would not be able to start the race on that bike. And we were in a rush. We eventually sorted something with Trek. He rode the bike of Sven Nys, and you could see that he had the power, but you could also see that in the corners he wasn't comfortable on that bike. It's a completely different machine, completely different geometrics on that bike. So I think without that, I'm not going to say he could have become world champion, but I'm not going to say he would have. Overall, third place for Nathan Smith is very good, and as we said, it continues the trend of good results of the Brits at this World Championships. Meanwhile, I also had time to look up when the last junior world champion from Switzerland was, and it was in 1998 when the World Championships took place in Middelfart, and it was Michel Baumgartner who took the title there. Let's look down our entire top 10 then. Jan Christen becoming the world champion for the Poggi team, racing for UAE in the next season. Aaron Dock second ahead of Nathan Smith. Fourth place went to Corentin Lequet. Bit of a surprise, but we've seen his talent throughout the season. Fifth place for Andrew August ahead of Victor van den Bergen and Wies Nuyens. Top 10 is rounded out by Ian Eckert, David Haverdings and Daniel Nielsen. A couple of names I would like to mention here. First of all, Andrew August, the American champion time trial for juniors, just the first year. I think we have to take our hat off here because a very impressive ride by the young American. We were expecting Spranger at the front, but it was in the end August, 5th place. I think he can be happy with that.
Yeah, I must say I hadn't really noticed his name before in the junior results this year, and if I just look back at it, I can see why. Really peaking toward the right day, and a great result indeed.
As time trial champion, this course probably suits him. I do know that from inside the American team, he was tipped. I think even one of the people who I reached out to inside predicted him for 5th exactly. So that's certainly an impressive pick by the insider there. So good result by the young American, as said. And he immediately puts his name forward as one of the favorites for next year, as he's a first year. And I think the same goes for Ian Eckert. We spoke with him on the preview podcast. The Canadian, dreadful luck in the first lap, but after that, solid lap times. Issam, I know it's always hard to speculate, but do you think that Ian Eckert could have become world champion without that bad luck in the first lap?
That is a tough call. I definitely would have said that he would be able to be in the top 5, but he lost a chunk of time as well because he was like at the back of the field when it happened, and very hard to say, but I definitely think that his chances would have been a little bit bigger when he would have been not having the issue, and then maybe a podium was possible and he would have been in that first group for sure a little bit longer. But that is how it goes sometimes, and it doesn't really go always like you plan to, and that is something that Haverdings also can say.
Yeah, because Haverdings was the favorite, took a tumble, but do you guys think in general that the tumble was the issue, or was there more to it today? Haverdings just not good enough?
I think from the laps after, you can kind of see that maybe it wasn't quite there, but of course, like he would have tried for like 1 or 2 laps, and it's quite hard when you hit the deck on what would be quite a hard surface to get going sometimes again. And I think he just struggled a little bit with it. And then when you're not really getting any closer and you just came to win the title, then mentally it can be very tough as well. So I don't know. It's unfortunate that he crashed and that we never got to see what the actual answer is.
I agree, because I think a crash, it breaks up your rhythm, and especially in terms of the morale, you could see his head immediately went down. He knew, oh, I'm so far behind, this is not going to be possible, especially when they accelerated at the front. In the beginning, he still gained time, but then it was quickly game over, and I think we have to conclude that for a number of riders, this World Championships wasn't what they expected it to be. Jordi Corses, the Belgian champion, ending 11th outside of the top 10. Also a rider that was highly tipped for a good result here. Then we look further, Jack Spranger, also not great, 13th. I mean, it's still a decent result, don't get me wrong, but also not where he was tipped for. 15th place, Luca Paletti. Of course, he only arrived on Friday due to a mandated quarantine after the World Cup in Hogerheide. And then in 19th place, Luca Lesseur. Also not good result by him. He was one of the riders who I thought could even end on the podium considering his season. So 19th place is also not what he will be happy with. Of course, also a couple of riders with some bad luck throughout the race. But considering at the end of the day, we need to conclude that it were mainly the second years who at the championships put their nose at the front and were stronger, as is quite typical at championships. Well then, I think we've come to an end of these World Championships. Time to make up our conclusions. We already talked about the British riders, how we think that the Brits did this championships. Let's focus on the Dutch and the Belgians. Issam, how do you think the Dutch will look back upon these World Championships?
Definitely some highs. I think, obviously that women under 23 podium is an achievement. It was an expected one, obviously. I think that everybody kind of knew that it was going to be a 1-2-3 for the Netherlands. I think the women junior was maybe with Lauren Molengraaf on third place was a surprise, kind of, having their 2 medals. Van der Haar also very, very good achievement. I think maybe at the women elite, Persico in third instead of Alvarado was a small disappointment, but I think overall the Dutch can look on a championship where they can be happy, but also it wasn't a complete championship. I think that the men under 23 was quite disappointing. Haverdings not being able to be close to a title. Those are things that obviously didn't help with the Dutch, and I think that they can look back on some ups, some downs, just an average championship with definitely some medals. And yeah, they probably are willing to prove a lot more in Hogerheide, in own country, to show the orange jerseys more at the front and on the podiums, and probably with more titles.
And then the Belgians, Twan, what did you think about their championships? How will they look back? Also a decent championship, or maybe disappointing or surprisingly good?
I would be quite disappointed if I were a Belgian. I mean, in the men's elite category, you come home with a bronze medal. I mean, it's kind of in the line of expectations that you get at least a silver and maybe challenge a bit more for gold. With like all the riders that you have there. I mean, you win the U23 in the men's very well, just a very good race for them. Junior race, silver, it's okay, it can happen. And women's, of course, there's nothing. So I think, yeah, for Belgium, it's just a bit of a okay World Championship. You hope for more, but I think the men's under 23 makes up for a lot.
Yeah, I think so as well. The Belgians may be missing one medal, but at the same time, it's an overall decent result by them. We have to conclude that for now, especially seeing the lack of talent in the women's side, that it's just hard for Belgium to top the medal tables now that there's an equal amount of men and women's medals to achieve at the World Championship. And as long as they're going to lose out on the medals in 3 categories, it's going to be difficult. Of course, next year in the women's junior category, there's going to be Xaide van Sinai and Shani the Shoesitter, or Schumacher. I do not know the exact surname at this point, but she will also be coming through in the junior women's category, which could potentially shift things there. But overall, we maybe need to conclude that for Belgium, it's going to be difficult to top the medal table like they've done for years, as long as their women's side is lacking. Then a final question, the World Championships itself in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Of course, there can be a lot said about the political climate it's being held in. There's no way we can go around it. It's not a great situation to host it in Arkansas, but the event itself, our conclusions, was the event itself a success about the course, spectator numbers and things?
I'm positive about the parkour, and I think that it was a nice touch that it was a fast one, but that is something that is in the hands of the weather and the nature, and not in the hands of the organizers. I think there were definitely some very positive things in it with the stairs. I really like the stairs. The downhill that you had after that reminded a little bit of Zonhoven, and yeah, I think overall it was a pleasure to watch. I really liked it. Something else, something different. I hated the time, to be honest, to watch a race at night, but we can't not really complain because the Americans, they also have to watch at not the greatest of times to cyclocross. So we just felt now a little bit the same with the race at night. But I think overall, the championship was a good event. I enjoyed it. I like the American fans. They're always very cheering, and they make the race a bit more special. And I think that we should look in the future how we can make sure that an event in the States will be more and more successful, and see how we can grow the sport in the States, because it's an important country for the sport.
I also think that the event itself was a decent success. Not the 10 to 12,000 spectators the organizers had hoped for, but still 7,500 is a decent amount, and that's excluding the entourage that there is. So in total, there were probably over 8,000 people there at the event, so pretty decent. The course itself, as Isam said, the weather, you can't control that. I don't think I have anything to add to that. It was a decent World Championship, not the best I've seen, but also certainly not the worst. And then for Twan, for you, the final words on the event itself.
Yeah, I mean, I on the other end, I quite enjoyed watching cyclocross at night. It gives you really something to do with your day, and then you get to treat yourself to some very good racing in the evening. I think the parkour may be lacking like one or two things in certain key sections, but all in all, for championships, I think it was quite okay. And just really enjoyable for hopefully the US cyclocross scene to grow as well.
Well then, we come to an end of the World Championships. Twan and Isam, thank you once again for joining me late at night to talk about it right after the race.
Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for hosting, and thanks for the listeners to listen.
The cyclocross season is not over yet. Next weekend we have more racing. We go to Lille for the X2O trophy and to Maldegem for the Etias Cross Series. We'll be back with making podcasts for the rest of the season, and we still have word that we will be able to provide you guys with an interview with at least one world champion throughout the rest of the season and some other one-off episodes. Thanks again for listening, everyone, and we will see you guys soon. Goodbye.